Hey, kia ora koutou whānau. Welcome back to another edition of Big Hairy News as I just turned my phone onto silent. Hey, Chewy.
Hi, Pat. How you doing?
Hi, team. How's everyone in the chat? All being nice to each other, hopefully. If you're not nice to each other, the moderators will slam you. That's how it goes.
On the naughty step.
The naughty step. Hi, team. Yes, we have got, as most people are aware, leader of the Labour Party, Chris Hipkins, otherwise known as Chippy on the show and known as the Chipolata, coming up very, very shortly. But before we do that, we just thought we'd get a couple of housekeeping. You know, when you go to a meal, housekeeping, the toilets, if you need to go to the toilet, they're out this door here and to the left. And if there's an emergency, everyone follow me out the door to the backyard. There are our announcements to start the show. No, in all seriousness, the announcements are happy to take questions and comments from you guys in the chat, but I just want to make very, very clear to you, because I know what you guys do. If you offer us a super chat tonight, thank you for that in advance, but a super chat is not going to be a guarantee of being used while Chippy's on, all right? Even if you did like a $200 super chat, you could even test us on that if you wanted to. No, I'm just kidding. But I just wanted you all to know, to be really, really aware that we always show all super chats unless they're kind of illegal or revolting. But there is no guarantee of a super chat tonight being used while Chippy is with us. He's going to be with us for about the first half hour or so. So just being clear and honest, and welcome to ask questions, welcome to make comments. Don't have to do it as a super chat, might get used anyway. So just making that very, very clear. We could rip into it. Should we just rip into it? I was going to do our normal thing about, hey, what did you do over the weekend? But we can do that when the important people have gone.
My weekend was not very exciting, Pat. You know, I love when it said like, oh, what have you got planned for the long weekend? I work in a shop. Nothing changes. I didn't have any extra time off.
Well, Monday night, that was nice. It's nice to have Monday night off. Yeah, no show.
That's true.
It's Tuesday. Yeah, I'm the slave master. Let you off for a night, bro. Very, very good. All right, guys, we'll talk about the movie Elvis, which I watched over the weekend when we come back. Let us welcome to the show and leader of the opposition. I guess it's the biggest party, certainly the leader of the Labour Party, Chris Hipkins, joins us. Chris, good evening to you, sir.
Good evening. How are you?
Yeah, good. Are you the leader of the opposition when there are multiple oppositional parties? Do they have the biggest party tend to be called that, or how is there a title for that?
Yeah, the biggest party, the leader of the biggest non-government party is the leader of the opposition.
Okay. So, all right. Leader of the opposition, leader of the Labour Party, former Prime Minister. I like watching American politics, Chris, and when you leave office, they still use your title. So, you know, they talk about Clinton being President Clinton or his wife being, you know, Madam Secretary. They still keep them their titles. We don't do that that way. You're not still Prime Minister Chris Hipkins. They don't can you that. It's always formal for us. I think it's an interesting way that the Americans do it.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of, I don't know, it's a bit less pretentious the way we do it, though. I kind of quite like the fact that we don't sort of have those kind of conventions. I think it's quite nice that you get to just go back to being a normal person again.
Do you, though? Is that possible? I mean, there's one person in politics over the last 20 years that you know very well, probably Jacinda Ardern, who possibly will never get a chance to go back to a normal life. But for most of you, you can?
Yeah, I mean, I guess, you know, you're much more recognisable. When I'm down at the local pack and save, I still get lots of people coming up to me and wanting to have a chat. But for the most part, they're pretty friendly. You know, you get the odd person who comes up and says, you know, I hate you and I hate your government, or I hated your government. But that's actually, I mean, if you have 20 interactions with someone, one of them might be like that, and the rest of them are generally pretty friendly.
Even though we haven't done this week, Chris, movie? Did you see a movie? What's the last movie you saw? I saw Elvis in the weekend. We normally talk about what we did in the weekend. You got one? What have you seen recently?
Well, you know, I've had this wonderful new blended family thing going on, and one of the people in that family is a Star Wars fanatic. So I'm being encouraged to watch Star Wars from the very beginning. So we're actually finally up to the very first Star Wars made, which was A New Hope, which is what we watched. But I had to watch all of the other newer, earlier ones because we're watching them chronologically. So we watched A New Hope the other night. So you know, there you go.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, I've done that recently as well. In fact, I just started watching. I watched, in fact, Rogue One the other day, which I really like as an independent movie, to say how those plans got in the droid before Princess Leia got it. I thought it was a cool little self-enclosed bit as well. All right. Have we got any other questions, Chewy, or should we wrap up for the night?
No, that's it. Covered off all the important stuff.
Hey, I'm going to play some. What we do here, Chris, is we often use audio and video made by real media people, and then we speak to it. I want to play something for you right now that was on One News this evening about what many people are calling a broken promise by the current government. Have a listen to this.
Cancer advocate Malcolm Mulholland says the government promised the cost would be covered by reintroducing the $5 prescription charge. Christopher Luxon accepts people's lives are at stake.
We are working really hard on it. There's a number of options available to us, which we're working our way through so that actually when we procure those drugs, we've got them in a sustainable way and we deliver them consistently for New Zealanders going forward.
So we couldn't do that thing that we promised we'd do because we're not ready to do it. We have to figure it out. So we'll figure it out sometime soon. And whilst we're doing that, a bunch more New Zealanders will die. Would you like to speak to that, Mr. Hipkins?
Well, I mean, I think it was the wrong thing to promise during an election campaign. I think when you're talking about a matter of life and death, promising people access to particular drugs in exchange for their votes, I think is really cynical politics. And I also think it's not territory that New Zealand politics has gone into much before. There have been one or two examples, and I think of there have been a few where a particular drug has become an election campaigning football. And I think that's really unfortunate because if you look, say, to the States, for example, where the pharmaceutical lobby are big political contributors, they donate heavily to political campaigns. You get to the point where politicians promise access to drugs based on the strength of the pharmaceutical lobby and the size, and who's contributing to their campaigns and those sorts of things. New Zealand doesn't have that. We have Pharmac who make decisions about which drugs get funded and which don't. So I think that, the National Party shouldn't have gone down this road because I think it's actually a dangerous road to go down. But having promised people access to 13 new cancer drugs to then say, oh, well, we're not quite sure how we're going to do that, when for those people it literally is a matter of life and death. I think that's just cruel. So you dangle this big carrot in front of them, and a lot of people got really excited about that, and then to sort of snatch that away and say, well, we're just not sure how we're going to do it. The reality is it was always going to be a difficult promise for them to keep because they shouldn't have made it. But having made it, they should have figured out a way of delivering it.
Really random question. Could one consider this a verbal contract? We're always told that verbal contracts in law are the same as written contracts. If you get told, I will do A if you do B, and you do B and then they don't do A, I mean, has anyone ever actually tested that?
Unfortunately, sort of the parliamentary democracy doesn't quite work that way. When you vote, it is very much a case of you're voting for people based on their honesty and their integrity. And if they make a bunch of promises that they then don't keep, your only real recourse is to not vote for them again at the next election. This government seemed to be taking an attitude that actually democracy is something that only happens every 3 years. In other words, if you don't like it, well, you can just lump it for the next 2.5 years and then don't vote for us when the next election rolls around. I actually think that's a pretty narrow way of thinking about democracy. I actually think that, there is a responsibility for governments to actually be consulting people and talking to people right the way through the 3-year parliamentary term, taking on board that feedback. We did some stuff that was controversial, but we still made sure that people had the opportunity to have their say on it during that time. We didn't just say, oh, well, if you don't like it, you've just got to wait 3 years before you can do anything about it. Yeah.
Do you take that also as a lesson for you guys? I mean, there's no actually getting around that. There was a hammering last year in the election. So is that what you guys are going to be doing for this 3 years? Actually listening to the voters, talking to the voters? I mean, I had to laugh watching Q&A over the weekend, and me and Troy might look at that a bit later on tonight, when Nicola Willis was asked, why are you doing these tax cuts? And she said, well, because I spoke to lots of New Zealanders and told them I was going to do tax cuts, and that's why. But I mean, I'm taking the piss a bit, but in all reality, is that what this 3 years out of government is? A time to kind of regroup, reprioritize, look to what the voters are saying and get to it again?
Yeah, it's kind of a difficult and yet interesting period for us because obviously we're not in government, so we don't have the day-to-day decision making. So that does open up some space to talk to interesting people, to read, to come up with some new ideas and some new thinking on the challenges the country faces. The reason I say it can be challenging is because after an election loss like that, you get a series of contradictory demands placed on you. So you get people who say, why did you lose? You're not listening to people. You need to get out there and you need to listen to people about why you've lost. But then those same people will often then be saying, you need to go be faster and committing to do X, Y, and Z and this particular thing that I want you to do. You can't actually do both of those things. You can't say, well, we're going to go out there and listen to people and we're going to start announcing a whole lot of new policy immediately off the hoof without actually going through that exercise of getting out there and listening to people. So you kind of got to get the balance right. So we are doing a bit of reflection, over the 6-year period that we're in government. There's a lot that we did that I'm really proud of. But if I could go back and do it again, there are undoubtedly things that we'd look at and go, we should have done some things a bit differently. And so, now's our chance to do that. And I guess the other thing that makes life interesting is that the 2026 election campaign won't be a rerun of the 2023 election campaign. There'll be the world moves on and people's lives move on, and the things that people are looking for from politics will be a bit different than 2026 to in 2023. Having said that, the big challenges the country faces are still going to be there. We've got a massive growth in inequality over the last 40 years that actually contributes to so many of the things people are concerned about. If we want to talk about the fact that we've got increasing violent crime, we've got increasing challenges in things like school achievement, we've got increasing health problems in some areas of the community. Actually, inequality is a huge contributor to that, and the 40 odd years of the current economic way of thinking and to thinking about the economy has really just left increasing numbers of people behind. And we have to have, I think, come 2026, we need some better answers to that than the ones that we've had so far.
Yeah. You talk about you go out and talk to people before you make legislations. Have you not heard of this thing called fast tracking? There's this group in right now that don't seem to want to do that so much. And I will say as well, Chewy, you'll jump in after this question, mate, is that it feels like from our side looking in, and look, we display our bias on our sleeve. We vote left, we're on the left, but we call balls and strikes, right? That's where we sit politically. It's so we look at what's going on and we think from commentators, from communicators, from broadcasters, what could and should be getting said by the left in general to help out. It's good to now hear that the right, and I know this is oversimplifying it left and right, it's not quite like that, but the right is now finally saying they're making choices. Again, on that Q&A show, Nicola Willis admitted that they're making choices. And the thing that it feels like for us that must never be left behind by the left in this election cycle is no matter what the government says, there's always this big looming choice of you can't afford it, but you gave $3 billion to landlords. You can't afford 280 million for cancer drugs, to come back to the start of this conversation. It was over 4 years as well. So that's what, 70 million a year, 7 4s are 28, is that right? So that's 70 million a year whilst you're giving 3 billion back to landlords. And I hope that the left, every answer for the next 2.5 years, every time the government talks about budgets and not being able to, every single time they go, own it. You got to fucking own it. Because if you don't own it, then you haven't got a real conversation. You guys gave $3 billion back to landlords whilst you let these people die, literally dying, no hyperbole here, literally die for 70 million. And now, when it's impacting you in I'm feeling a bit head up here. When it's impacting you in the polls and there's a backlash, all of a sudden, we are going to do it, but we still are going to do it. It's like, no, you don't get a do-over. You don't get a mulligan like in golf. And I just really hope you guys grasp that and just, everything that goes on when there's another cyclone and we don't have enough money. Well, $3 billion back to landlords again and again and again and again and again. I don't know. I feel it's fair to let you respond to that, Chris, before Chewy jumps in. So feel free, sir.
You're absolutely right. Look, every government budget's about choices, right? And so they've chosen to prioritise $2.9 billion, nearly $3 billion worth of tax cuts for landlords. And every time Nicola Willis or Christopher Luxon say, we had to make choices, we couldn't afford this or we couldn't afford that, actually they should be a bit more upfront and say we prioritise tax cuts and we would prioritise tax cuts for landlords over doing those other things. Because the reality is there are many, many things that they could have done for that money, and they've just made bad choices. But the other thing is, if you look at the cuts, I've got to say that the language that they're using is it's patronising and offensive. When they talk about we're ending the dumb stuff, we're ending the wasteful spending. Well, they've cut $1 billion out of the maintenance budget for state houses. Now, that's not dumb stuff. That's not wasteful spending. That's making sure that our state houses are properly maintained. These are we've got billions and billions of dollars worth of them. And as a good landlord, we should be making sure they're maintained. They've done this before. And the end result was that we ended up with people, not having a roof over their head, living in cars, and state houses that were moldy, damp, and miserable. So, what they call dumb stuff and wasteful spending isn't. Cutting funding for science and innovation isn't wasteful spending. It's actually where some of the jobs of the future are going to come from. And I just think that so much of what they're doing is so short-sighted. They're taking money out of things that are going to have a long-term payback for the country to pay for what are very short-term priorities.
Yeah. Chewy, sorry, I'm going to throw one more thing there. I know I'm dominating this, so I apologize.
No worries.
Because it just speaks directly to what you've just said, Chris. The dumb stuff, the backroom stuff that's not important. Police minister has come out today assuring staff cuts will not affect the front line. The police minister is saying this. I've actually got the clip with Mr. Luxon on breakfast this morning, but I won't play it. The minister of police said he's been assured that the loss of nearly 200 corporate support roles in addition to over 200 vacant positions from a recruitment freeze will not affect the front line. Staff revealed last week the following, that the government's budget police commissioner Andrew Costa told the government had also asked police to deliver $55 million worth of savings by reducing corporate support functions. This would mean about 175 jobs. There's also a part in this story, and I've missed it, haven't I, where basically the police commissioner has said it actually would impact frontline staff. And there was an example given where the transcription services was one of the dumb things. There's been an example due to workload. They are no longer typing notebooks entries for court. This falls back onto the officer in charge. So the police commissioner is actually saying this is going to impact frontline staff. The government saying, no, it won't. Police commissioner saying, yeah, it will. And one of the examples they've given is people who transcribe out the notepads, which now the police officers are going to have to do. So a police officer is going to have to use his or her notepad, come back to the office, and then with his two big fat fingers type out the report because all the transcribers have been fired. And this is what this government's calling dumb stuff and backroom stuff that's not going to impact the front line. So it's completely frustrating.
Well, the back office frontline distinction is just a complete nonsense anyway. I mean, I don't know how they came up with that. And this idea that, all of our public servants are just people sitting behind desks in Wellington, dreaming up new ways to make life complicated for people is just absolute nonsense as well. About it's the 4th of June. So about 2 years ago, almost exactly, I became Minister of Police. And one of the first things I did as Minister of Police was go around and visit every police district in the country. And so I spent quite a lot of time listening to those frontline police officers talking about what they loved about their job and what they found difficult about it. And I toured all the police stations and I met all of the staff who worked there, including the non-sworn police staff. And when you see what they're doing, the idea that you could cut, millions of dollars out of that and not have an impact on the frontline police officers in uniform is just a fiction. Making sure that police have all of their files ready when they show up in court might be a back office function, but it's pretty critical to those frontline police staff because it means that they can then get back out on the beat. One of the most frustrating things for police is showing up and spending a day sitting outside a courtroom to go into the court and then have the judge say, oh, we're missing pieces of paperwork, so you've got to go back and find those and come back and spend another day sitting outside the courtroom again. Because every time a police officer is sitting outside a courtroom, they're not actually out on the street doing their jobs. Yeah. And so the back office is pretty blimmin' critical in that regard.
Yeah. Chewy, I'm going to shut up.
Just off that last comment, Chris, my mum works for corrections, and I think she'll 100% back what you've just said there, that if it's not for the backroom people, then the courts just lock up. It just doesn't work. The whole thing falls apart. The question I have for you, the election, we had you coming off a very difficult transition into leadership. Probably an unexpected transition into leadership. And you had National and ACT, and New Zealand First were burbling away there, but they weren't the main offenders, just really hammering home, I guess, some very pervasive myths about Labour and a left-leaning government. bad at numbers, overspending, soft on crime, all the same things that are always dragged out in an election. And yet, what we didn't see was really you guys singing your wins. You were kind of, in our eyes, playing defensively. Do you recognize that as well? Or is there a point when you're the government that you just can't come out swinging and going, look, we kept a whole bunch of you alive and in your homes and in your businesses during COVID. Nobody else has ever dealt with this. Actually, compared to everyone else, we're doing really well. Where are your figures that you're coming at this from? Because you guys borrowed during the global financial crisis more than we borrowed for COVID, that sort of stuff.
Yeah. Look, I mean, there's lots that I'd go back and do differently if I could. That 9-month period was a bit of a baptism by fire, and, there are plenty of things that I would do differently in that time if I could go back and do that again. But I mean, ultimately, I think, what's happened since the election has actually proven that the stuff that we were doing wasn't wrong and the things that we were saying weren't wrong. Nicola Willis was hammering us for borrowing too much money. Well, this year's budget borrows more money than 5 of the 6 budgets that we delivered. So, there was only 1 year where we borrowed more money than Nicola Willis is borrowing this year, and that was the year we had to deliver the wage subsidy during the peak of the global pandemic. So this idea that somehow we were reckless with borrowing money when she's borrowing more money than we did in all but one of our budgets, I think just shows that what they were saying was wrong. But also they're trying to boil this down. And you see them doing it on the news every night, where they're trying to compare the government's finances to a household budget. And it's just crazy. Actually, the government finances are not like a household budget. It's very, very different. And so this idea that, it's difficult times and everyone at home is having to make savings, so we have to make savings too. Actually, the savings that you're making are the things that are contributing to the financial pressure that Kiwis or families are under, not the other way around. And so I just think that, certainly one of the lessons for me was probably to tackle them more forcefully on some of that stuff. And I started to do that during the election campaign. So you would notice, actually, I mean, it's been plenty of commentators have written about it. Between the first leaders' debate and the second and the third ones, I became much, much more assertive in pushing back on the nonsense that they were out there pushing. And probably
we noticed.
Yeah, but one of the things I would do differently if I could go back again was I would be a bit more assertive right from the beginning on that stuff.
And to be honest, Chris, not to sound negative, when we saw that, we were like, where the fuck has this been? Where has this been for the last 6 months? Speaking of things that you'd do differently, capital gains tax. It's a good idea. It's good policy. It's popular. Is that one of the things that you might have reconsidered looking backwards, or do you still stand by no capital gains tax?
I think... ultimately, it's a tricky one. I probably think we should have gone into the election campaign with a different tax policy to the one that we did go into the election campaign with. And so that's one of the reasons why I've said since the election, let's go back and let's look at this again. So blank piece of paper, let's start again. Fundamentally, the challenge of New Zealand's tax system is that it's a very unbalanced tax system when we look at the countries that we would typically compare ourselves to. We place far more emphasis on taxing salary and wages relative, in terms of the overall pool of tax that the government collects than other countries do. We don't have, the different forms of taxation that Australia, the UK, the US rely on a daily basis. We don't. And that means that actually there's a chunk of people who pay a lot less tax than others. And I think that is an anomaly we have to fix. At the moment, the debate we're having as the Labour Party is how best to fix that. But some form of taxation of the earnings that are not currently taxed has to be part of that answer.
All right. Something for you as well, because I mean, you guys obviously do this, but because we see everything and talk about everything, mull over everything, there was a moment in the election campaign where this Mr. Luxon was very, very keen to tell the nation that, the CEOs don't like Labour. The CEOs don't like Labour. And here in the show, we were like, this used to be the party of the factory floor. Now what's where Labour's roots are, the party of the factory floor. You can have the CEOs, will be the party of the factory floor. Has Labour lost that a little bit? And do you need to get some of that back?
I think one of the things I get frustrated by is the idea that Labour is is not still really connected with working New Zealanders. The reality is that New Zealand has this thing against the notions of class, which I think is quite interesting. So in the UK, if you go to the UK, people would proudly describe themselves as working class. In New Zealand, no one proudly says, I'm a working class New Zealander. It's just not part of the Kiwi psyche. But the idea that Labour isn't in touch with the working class is, I think, really wrong. And it's based on the...
Well, hang on, let me say it this way then. The appearance out and about is that there is a difference, a disconnect compared to what there once was.
Well, but see, I think the disconnect is that people are thinking about a definition of a working class New Zealander that might have been true 40 years ago, but isn't now. You know, the nature of low and middle income New Zealand has fundamentally altered in the last 30 or 40 years. The proportion of people working in factories is much, much smaller than it used to be. The proportion of people working in big workplaces is much, much smaller than it used to be. In fact, a lot of the people who are doing kind of manual labor type work are actually self-employed contractors and regard themselves as small business people rather than working class people. And so I think we have to think about how we make sure we're actually representing those people, because some of the people who are self-employed are actually the people who are earning the lowest incomes and working the longest hours. And if the Labour Party is not in it for them, then who is? And so we have to actually make sure that we're talking to and connecting with that segment of our workforce.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah, so that's one of those myths again, though, isn't it? That National are the party of business. They're not the party of small business. No. They're the party of finance businesses.
Absolutely.
And real estate businesses.
Yeah, but what was interesting, as a minister, you do spend a bit of time, out and about around the corporate sector as well. And that was a bit of an eye-opener for me, because I actually found that a lot of those chief executives, when I talked to them, they're actually talking about many of the same issues that I would talk about if I went to the smoko room at the Watties factory. They're talking about their kids' education and their experience of it. They'll talk about the fact that one of their kids broke their arm and they ended up in the A&E over the weekend, and they'll give you their experiences of the New Zealand health system. They're actually talking about many of the same issues that I would encounter working in, talking to a group of blue collar workers. So, New Zealand is a bit of a village in that regard.
I'd like to know how you describe the conflict between Israel and Gaza at the moment. How do you actually describe what's going on?
I think that Israel's actions are manifestly unjust and unjustified. I think that it is a conflict that must be brought to an end. I think it's brutal and horrific what's happening to the people in Gaza who really have no choice and nowhere else to go. I think that the Hamas attack that started all of this, what was it, 8 months ago or so now, was a horrific event in itself. But the response that we have seen from that has been totally disproportionate, and I think the action that's been taken to hold those accountable for that, is the right stuff. I think the International Criminal Court and so on looking at it, I think is really important.
Would you use the word genocide?
Genocide, the problem with a politician using the term genocide is that when it comes to those ICJ, appearances, there's a particular meaning of that, and there are people whose job it is to determine whether or not it's genocide or not. And so it certainly is horrific, unjustified, and if the legal proceedings determined that it was genocide, I wouldn't be surprised by that.
Speaking of the legal proceedings, International Criminal Court wants to bring charges against Hamas for war crimes and wants to bring charges against Netanyahu for crimes against humanity. Are you comfortable with both of those? Are you comfortable with Benjamin Netanyahu being charged with crimes against humanity?
Those are ultimately, yes, but those are ultimately matters that I don't make those decisions. That's a legal process.
But yes, you're comfortable. Like if Benjamin Netanyahu, look, I'm not asking you about Hamas because we all know Hamas committed an atrocity, a war crime. Like I think that's goes without saying. But the one that doesn't go without saying for many people is the Benjamin Netanyahu one. So that's why I'm asking you about that. So you're comfortable if he was brought up on charges of crimes against humanity, you'd be comfortable with that?
Well, yes, because I mean, when you're bombing citizens, innocent civilians who have nowhere else to go, then any leader who knowingly does that should be held accountable for that.
And what should New Zealand do ultimately right now? What stance should we take? What action should we take, if any, as to what's going on over there?
I think New Zealand's been a bit slow to the party, and I think the stance that we're taking now is better than it was 6 months ago as a country. And one of the things that I got really frustrated with after the election was, as we saw that unfold and we saw it getting worse, I wasn't able to really say anything as the caretaker prime minister without the agreement of the incoming government. And in the end, I just thought they were far too slow in actually saying anything meaningful on it. So I ended up making a statement as the leader of the Labour Party, which was a little bit constitutionally tricky because I was still the prime minister at the time, but wasn't speaking as prime minister. But I do think New Zealand should have a strong independent voice in this. I think, an independent foreign policy means exactly that. It means that we speak from our values. And when I look at what's happening in Gaza, that's not consistent with New Zealand's values and the values that we've long held in the world. I think that we've seen more recent signals out of the government that they're willing to say something and do something, but it still feels like they're waiting for the rest of the world to join them before they actually show any leadership on the matter. And I think that, what's the point of saying we've got an independent foreign policy if we're not willing to lead?
Shall we?
So, one thing I'd love to know, Helen Clark kicked out the Israeli ambassador when Mossad agents were caught stealing identities of dead children and disabled people. What is the yardstick for getting rid of an ambassador, sending him packing? I mean, we've got Russia invading Ukraine and we've got what's going on in Gaza at the moment. Those are ones that have had pretty consistent calls to get rid of them back to their own countries.
Yeah. I mean, for me, it's a belief in the power of diplomacy that means that you don't expel ambassadors right, left and centre. Because how will you ever get to peace? How will you ever get to talking, to bring an end to the conflict if there's no one left to do the talking? And so that to me is the kind of the thing that we always have to keep in mind. We have an independent foreign policy. We should be conveying regularly to the representatives of those countries, Israel and Russia and the two examples that you just mentioned, what New Zealand's position is. But we would have no means of conveying that if we didn't have ambassadors here who we could call in and convey that message to. So, and that becomes an interesting challenge around the peace process too, for example. So if you take Hamas and let's just think about Ireland and Northern Ireland and the IRA, if the British people had simply said we're not going to communicate in any way with anyone who's been involved with the IRA, then the Good Friday Agreement never would have been reached. And, fundamentally, if we want to bring peace, at some point, people have to talk.
I'm just smirking because I'm just thinking about the Russian ambassador picking up the phone and speaking to Putin, going, "These Kiwis are getting a bit pissy with me." I don't know how well it would go down. Hey, I want to ask you a question about a story that, to be frank with you, I'm not really completely over yet. Over meaning understand in its entirety, but it does involve Labour, and it's the story coming about the allegations that Stats New Zealand are investigating potential misuse of Māori census data. The reason I want to ask you is because what it appears that some of the allegations are is that information was gathered to target Māori electoral voters in Tamaki Makaurau electorate. The allegations were also that marae staff delivered census forms, also included enrolment forms for voters to change from the general to Māori roll. And then participants were given a $100 supermarket voucher, wellness packs, or food parcels to induce them to complete the forms. And it seems like they are also given supermarket vouchers when they completed the forms to switch the roles. And the reason I'm asking you about this is because the seat was a Labour seat and lost by, I think, 42 votes. And this is an update on the story. Deleted social media videos raised fresh questions about allegations of treating voters to free food at Marae polling booth linked to a Te Pāti Māori MP. Late last year, it emerged concerns were raised about the use of Manirewa Marae as a polling booth during October's general election. New Tāmaki Makaurau MP Takutai Tash Kemp, who beat incumbent Labour MP Penny Henare by just 42 votes, was Marae's chief executive. It was the tightest race in the country, and the surprise upset led to a recount. So there's lots going around the internet about this at the moment, but it seems that there's some concerns that maybe some people were enticed to switch to the Māori role at a marae that this candidate was involved with, and then it was a really tight election. Do you have any thoughts or comments on that, understanding even of that?
Yeah, I do. And I think it's important that we separate what is actually perfectly legitimate and stuff that we should encourage, i.e. getting people to complete their census forms and getting people onto the electoral roll. Those are both good things. I think a marae taking an active interest in getting people doing those things is a good thing. With any idea that the information obtained through that process, for example, the census data, could have been used for a political purpose, that's more problematic. Now, it's complicated because there are legitimate uses of some of that data. So the electoral roll data, all political parties sign people up to the electoral roll, and in the process of doing that, they do their campaigning. You know, whenever we go out door knocking, canvassing for votes, we take enrolment forms, because you find a prospective Labour voter, you find out whether they're on the roll. If they're not on the roll, you make sure they are, because actually you want them to be able to vote and you want their vote to count. So that's all legitimate stuff. Census data, though, is very, very carefully protected. So a person doing both of those things and then potentially using census data for a political campaign, that's a big no-no. So if that's happened, and I'm not saying that that's happened, but if that's happened, that would be a big no-no. And then inducements also, you've got to be very careful there around inducements around an election campaign. So the idea that someone could have been offered something in exchange for voting a particular way, that's also a big no-no. So which I don't think that's the allegation at the moment, is it? I think it's more offered enticements to then sign on to the Māori role. I don't know if the allegations have been quite to then also vote for a particular party. Yeah, that's right. So I think there's a lot of smoke around this, and at this point, you know, the smoke hasn't cleared enough for us to figure out what's legitimate and what's not. Yeah. Lots of people in our chat, and there's lots of you, we're not going to bring up anyone in particular, want us to ask you about the idea of a Māori parliament that Awari started talking about last weekend after the second Māori activation, as they're calling it. You got any thoughts on that? I think, to be honest, I don't think it's going to go anywhere, and I don't think that even amongst Māoridom, there's a particularly strong support for that. King Tuheitia even has said that, you know, he's opposed to the idea. He said that just in the last couple of days. So I don't think that's going to go anywhere. I understand the rhetoric at the moment, and I certainly understand the anger amongst a lot of Māori about the way Māori issues are being treated and the way Māori feel that they've been attacked in the last 6 months. But I think the idea of a separate parliament's not going to fly. So what about then what's happening locally, where this government is looking to enforce binding referendums on councils to say yay or nay to Māori wards? I know the Māori ward is not a Māori parliament, but you know, there's a Venn diagram where they'd maybe slightly cross over in the corner a little bit between those two things. What are your thoughts around the government looking to do that? Well, Māori wards aren't creating a separate Māori council. They're just basically ensuring that Māori have representation on the council that's already there. And I think there's a real double standard at play here. So, you know, the National Party is saying, well, it's fine for a council to set up, say, a rural ward to ensure that its rural constituents are represented. 100%. There's no referendum on that. But creating a Māori ward, oh, no, we have to have a referendum on that. The reality is we do have a Māori electoral roll. So there's no good reason why, you know, councils shouldn't be able to set up a Māori ward if that's what they decide is in the best interests of their community. You know, we should treat them the same. And I tell you what, if you actually really want to go to the one person, one vote system, then stopping property owners voting in multiple different districts in the same election, which disproportionately benefits people with a lot of assets and a lot of wealth, that would actually be quite a good way of ensuring that. And I don't see the National Party clambering to do that anytime soon. If you look at my page, you see my notes here? See my notes? These are my notes for the conversation. Probably. So do you want to grab a snack before we crack into the second hour?
I've probably been through about half of them, Chris. But we thank you for being with us today. So I'll pull back now and stop, even though I've got more I could go to. Would like to maybe get to some of the chat questions from the punters. You're here live, so it'd be great to give people a chance to get access to you. Chewy, if you've got anything else first, though, you want to throw in there, and then maybe we can get to some of the chats.
Not so much a comment, but a personal observation. The biggest sacrificial idol that this country has that we need to solve is housing.
Yeah.
It is the investment of housing. It is how compromised people are that all of their money is tied up in housing. That's the only way to get ahead in this country. It's an enormous tax black hole. Nobody wants to tackle it. Nobody has any big ideas about it. It keeps money out of other things that could be pushing this country forward. That's, in my opinion, this one man's opinion, that is the big thing. And I'd love to say that I can solve it for you right now, but apart from you giving me the keys to Parliament and I'll come in the back way, I don't know how you do it, but that's what's holding us back.
But if you look at what this government have done, right, so they've dialed back the state house building program. They just cut $500 million out of that last week in the budget. They've reintroduced a big tax break for landlords, which makes life more difficult for first home buyers, isn't necessarily going to increase the supply of housing because there were already tax breaks available for people who are building new houses. The tax break they've brought back is for those who are buying existing homes. So there were already incentives for people to build new homes. They've dialed back the bright line test, which was a form of capital gains taxation for people who were buying and flipping houses for the short-term capital gain. So they've dialed that back. They've cancelled the first home buyer grants. So all of these things, when you add them up, cumulatively, it basically is taking us backwards on housing when we were starting to make some progress. Now, whenever we talk about housing, the National Party will throw Kiwi Build at us. Kiwi Build was, the problem definition was right, i.e. when you've got a housing crisis, you need to build more houses. The overall goal was still a good goal, build 100,000 affordable homes. That was still a good goal, but the mechanism wasn't right. And so we need to own that. We didn't get the mechanism for doing it right. But what we were trying to do with Kiwi Build was actually the right thing to do, which was to make sure we're building more affordable houses.
100%.
But there are some really interesting things that we can do. So I went and visited Simplicity Homes the other day. So Simplicity is a great KiwiSaver scheme, and they've been building affordable rental houses. So not houses for purchase, but houses for people to buy. Simplicity people can, they build them for below market cost. They rent them out for below market rentals. And their Simplicity KiwiSaver savers get the first dibs on the rental places, which means that their rent is actually going back to contribute effectively to their KiwiSaver, to the return that they get on their KiwiSaver. Actually, they're doing it using the methods that what used to be Housing Corp was very good at doing 30 or 40 years ago, which is to build in bulk, fairly standard designs of houses using fairly traditional building materials. So I think we need to kind of get back to doing some more of that. And I think that will actually help us to significantly increase the supply of houses. But everything that this government are doing is going the other way.
All right. Should we get to some chats and stuff?
Yeah, before our crowd lynches us. Yes.
Yeah. Right. I did have one more question. I have one more question though. 10 seconds from each of you. 32 felonies. Donald Trump go to jail? Yes or no?
Oh, should Donald Trump go to jail?
Yeah. 32 felonies.
Anything that stops him being president again.
All right, yours, Chewy.
I want it so bad. I want that to happen so bad, and I just don't have enough faith in the American system to actually see it. Right, question time. From Belfast Child. One question. What practical steps can we take to ensure this truly awful government is limited to one term, brackets, or less? Brackets.
So I'll tell you something that we should all do, regardless of, I mean, it's an answer to this question, but it's also an answer to a bigger question, which is continue to talk to people who disagree with you. Continue to talk to people who have different views to you, because one of the reasons that election campaigns become so polarized and it becomes so hard to shift people is we're all these days encouraged to talk only to the people who already agree with us. And actually, if you want to shift election campaigns, you've got to talk to the people who you disagree with. And so if you want this to be a one-term government, go find people who voted for it and tell them why you think they don't deserve to be re-elected.
Cool. Comment here from Spiderhoof. Kia ora, Chris. Keep up the great mahi. We are all watching and listening and here to help you in the fight. P.S. I'm happy to help you with the social media game. Yeah, Spiderhoof wanted to help out as well. So lots of help out there being offered. And then any more questions in there, particularly, Chewy? Lots of chats.
Sort of segueing out of the Gaza question, would you personally support acknowledging a Palestinian state?
Yes, and we called for that some time ago. So New Zealand doesn't have a form of officially recognising statehood. The way we do that is by inviting ambassadors to present their credentials. And so we have called on the New Zealand government to invite the Palestinian ambassador to present their credentials, and that's effectively the way that New Zealand conveys that we recognise statehood, is by doing that. And so we've said the New Zealand government should do that now.
Cool. Question here from Lurchify. Could Chippy please talk about what he sees as the potential gains in Labour's relationship with Te Pāti Māori and the Greens?
It's an interesting one. When you're in opposition, you're always in this state of, I describe it as co-opetition. So we're sort of competing for votes, but we're also cooperating with one another. All three of the parties mentioned, Labour, Te Pāti Māori and the Greens, we all want to see a change of government. And so we do need to work together to achieve that. But we'll also have areas where we disagree as well. So I've got a very good relationship with the co-leaders of all of those parties. I don't know all of the new MPs. There's quite a few new MPs in both of them, but getting to know them over time. And, I'm absolutely confident that we could work together in government. We've worked well with those parties in government before. So I think, again, over this opposition period, it's a time for us to get to know each other a little bit. And that's what we're doing at the moment. There'll be areas where we can agree on. In some cases, we may even have things where we can go into the campaign and say, hey, look, we've already talked about issue X, Y, and Z, and we're all on the same page on that, but we have a slightly different take on issues A, B, and C. If we can get to that point for the campaign, I think that'll be healthy and positive.
Was this a harder election for that? Because I think there was a little bit of a speed wobble between Labour and Greens, especially over climate policy, tax policy, that sort of thing. And I guess they're wanting to pull you more to the left, and then you're wanting to go more to the centre to pull votes away from National. And I guess it seemed for a little bit that you guys and Greens were kind of having at each other a little bit. Do you think that hurt support?
No, I don't think so. I think we've had a really positive sort of relationship behind the scenes, and there are always areas where you disagree. But if I look back on our record on climate change, we've done more. We did more in 6 years than any government in New Zealand's history in that area, and we actually had emissions trending, starting to trend down. I think almost all of the actions this government have taken are going to shoot the emissions profile back up the other way again. But we did that working together, and we had different takes on things. So if you take pricing agricultural emissions, for example, we had a different take on how to do that than the Greens, but we wanted to get to the same point.
I've got another question here. I'm just scanning as we're doing it. Here's a comment from Cs. Cs just says, Chippy, you need to be louder about Palestine. It's plausible genocide already. Just a little, someone's writing a speech for you there, Chris, and if you want to pay any attention to that. But here's a question from Doom. Kia ora, Chippy. Do you support NZ joining AUKUS? Seems we've moved towards less independent foreign policy through the last decade through successive governments. SOS of this has been covered. There you go. We haven't talked about AUKUS, so what are your thoughts?
So AUKUS means that there's a couple of bits to that. Do I support New Zealand joining AUKUS? No, absolutely not. Fundamentally, AUKUS is a nuclear-powered submarine pact between Australia, the UK, and the US, and we shouldn't be part of that. We're proudly nuclear-free. Then there is this thing called AUKUS Pillar 2, which at this point, it's still not clear entirely what that involves. It involves new technology and exchange of information about new technology. We don't know at this point what that involves, whether it's even going to be relevant for New Zealand. And if some of those discussions are relevant, whether we would need to be part of AUKUS Pillar 2 in order to be involved in those discussions or not. My own view right now is that I haven't seen anything that suggests New Zealand's got much to gain from being involved in AUKUS Pillar 2. The reason we haven't been absolutely definitive about that is because who knows what AUKUS Pillar 2 actually is at this point. But I'd take a lot of convincing that there's anything for New Zealand to gain from that.
Hey, Chris, it's been fabulous having you on. Thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate you being a part of the show tonight. As is our tradition, we've kept you far longer than we thought we would, but hopefully it's been okay.
It's been great. I'm happy to come back and chat to you again. It's been really good.
Yep. Well, we're here 4 nights a week. You know, we can have you one night, we can have Kieran the next night, you then, Kieran, then you, then we can just line it up. And maybe slip a Chloe in there occasionally because that's Chewy's favourite. I don't mean to play favourite with Chewy, but you know.
I've been saying you have completed our lefty leader bingo card now. So it's been great to have you on.
Oh, very good. Very good.
Really appreciate your time. Now, look, really appreciate your time. Thank you for answering straight questions to some of the guys watching live as well. They're here for you. It is literally right now the biggest live show we've ever done. As I speak to you, it's the biggest number that we've ever had live. So they wanted to hear from you. So thank you for coming along and being a part of it. Appreciate it.
Very good. All right. Cheers.
Thanks, Chris.
Thanks, mate.
All the best. Yes, literally. I'm just going to take another screen grab because I'm a egomaniac. Should we get the rest of those chats there, Chewy? Because they're
there were a lot. Which ones did we miss?
I don't know. I tried to delete some. And as we said at the start, guys, we're honest with you. Like a super chat doesn't necessarily dictate definitely being on while Chippy's there, but you know, we'll get through them now. And thank you for being a part of what we've been doing. It was great.
I mean, this one stuck out for me. Obviously, not a question, but I was watching that issue on the AM show. First thing I heard from Luxon was, "I understand what you're going through." I'm guessing this is talking about the cancer meds. Yeah, exactly. It is an insulting comment because unless you're going through something like that, no, you can't. You can empathize. You can listen to what they're saying, but he has made an intensely personal, literal life or death situation a political act, a bargaining card, a please vote for me. He even told us the mechanism of how it was going to work. Okay, everyone's going to have to pay a $5 prescription fee. We're putting that back on, but it's so we can pay for the cancer meds.
Yeah, and it
was so specific.
Yeah, there was a lot of people
go, lol, fuck you.
Yeah,
no.
There was a lot of people when we pushed back against that last year, and I'm going to actually bring something up as I'm showing to you because this is how blatant they were. So this is Jenny May, but I won't play this whole thing, but this is the blatancy. This is the form from last year.
Prime Minister, this is your document.
Correct.
Right? This is your policy document, helping more Kiwis fight cancer. Can I go to the first line in this document? Which says, National will increase access to life-saving and life-extending cancer medicines by investing $280 million over 4 years to fund 13 treatments that are currently available in Australia and also in New Zealand. You didn't fund those in the last budget.
And yes, round and round and round that conversation goes now about what will be happening, really happening. It's just like I know I got a little bit hit up. I just said fuck to Christopher Hipkins. I hope that's okay. Not at him though, more at the subject matter we were talking about. But it's actually the more I think about it, the angrier I get. Because I get governments have to make choices sometimes between, this state funding and this state funding. But to say to these people, we are here for you. We are going to come in and we are going to bring in our little hands these 13 things that will either extend or save your life. Trust us, people with cancer. We are here for you. We will do it. I guarantee you, there would be plenty of people who would have bit their cheek and go, I don't know about these guys, but I need this cancer treatment, and their families and their relatives. And that would have got them votes. And then to go, meh, is just like, honestly, I know it's a small dollar figure in comparison, but that's a part of it, is the worst of the worst. If you won 43 million tonight on Lotto, I hope you can find one or two people that are going to miss out because of this and maybe help them out. That would be amazing, because this government's not.
And again, we'll keep hammering this point, as we told Chippy to keep hammering this point. The $5 prescription charge paying for cancer meds, that was one thing. The other thing is the money that they just gave landlords That's the other thing that could have funded those meds. That could have been in the mix there. It's not. It's AWOL.
Yeah.
And he said that he's working real hard to find a way. Do you know how you've had time to work really hard? It's called the budget. You've apparently been working on that really, really hard as well.
Yeah.
So either way, one of those you were working real hard on, but not hard enough.
And
not hard enough for people with cancer.
I lost my track of thought when I was just ranting there, because what I was going to say is, when we said last year, I don't know about this cancelling the $5 prescription fee, the pushback we got was, but it's going towards cancer drugs. I'm not that comfortable. I'd rather have free, but it's going, you, Pat and Chewy, you guys don't want to fund cancer drugs. Well, actually we do. We just didn't fall for the bullshit hype. And Chippy said something really interesting tonight. He basically went, and we were right. And he's right. So everything that we were saying before the election, everything that the left was saying before the election about this government, all of it, it's all fucking right. You believe the hype. You believe the Three Waters racist. You believe the mandates, and you voted for these guys, and they've done everything and more. Smoke-free 2025 and more than they said we would do. And we warned you. We talked about 1990s. They had cash registers in the A&E departments. Is that really that far from sorry, cancer patients? You know what I'm saying? We warned you and we told you, and they're doing it. And those that are not vulnerable are laughing now. And those that are vulnerable are fucked. And if you are one of the vulnerable, other than the cancer patients, I just feel empathy for you, because you got lied to. I was watching the movie Elvis in the weekend, to go back to it. And have you seen the movie, Chewy? Elvis? The new one?
Was the weirdest segue.
No. It's a good one, because they talk about doing a snow job. They talk about making it snow. A snowman in this vernacular means someone who can fleece money out of people's pockets and have them smiling as they walk away. That's what this feels like. We used to say it's a shell game. How many times did I say that last year? Don't believe National's shell game. They'll go quit, and the P won't be there. And it's exactly what has happened. If you've seen the Elvis movie, you'll know what I mean. The Colonel Tom Parker talks about being a carny, a carnival guy, and he knows how to fleece people and leave them smiling, and he calls himself the snowman. And it's what's happened. I feel nothing. I feel angry, actually, for cancer victims at the moment. But if you're vulnerable and you voted based on Three Waters mandate, then man, I try to feel empathy for you, because you have been fleeced by a better carny than we've seen before, but you've still been fleeced, and we warned you. Sorry, you go, Joey.
I'm just blown away by how weird that segue was. You've been wanting to talk about the Elvis movie the entire
worked,
night,
though.
and that's how you got there. No, it worked, and I'm terrified about how well that worked. There's a great look. If we had Chippy for longer, and hopefully we'll have him back again.
He'll be back.
There's some great questions here. I would have loved to ask him this one. Hey Chippy, if you could bring back one past minister, and also you didn't specify alive or dead, which I think is great. One past minister to work with nowadays, who would it be?
Yeah, nice.
That's a great question. So I'm going to stick that in the memory hole and hopefully come back to that.
Can I say as well, we'll just do all these chats now, actually, because people have been generous enough to do super chats. Just for people who are watching, and I know if you're watching on YouTube, you'll see 600 and something. We got over 1,000 live viewers in that segment, because remember, we've got TikTok, and not TikTok. We've got Twitter, and we've got Facebook as well. And we did it's still over 1,000 right now. You've all stayed. I can't believe why. Chippy's gone, guys. You're not aware. He's not coming back. Well, thank you. 1,010 as we speak. So let's get them all. Let's do these, because you know what, guys, we might actually call this a night after this, because I've got Q&A, but I don't think we can do Q&A in 5 minutes. So maybe we'll put it across till tomorrow night. So yeah, what else have we got?
What else have we got? Some of you may die, but that's a risk I'm willing to take. Luxon, probably. Yeah.
Some of you may die. Yeah.
Oh, what else have we got here? Mr. Alex would like to ask Chris Hipkins if he's familiar with the Harm Reduction Coalition Aotearoa, and is he in favour of ending prohibition in New Zealand? Again, I was trying to look for an angle to bring up the referendum and drug reform and that sort of thing. It's just so it's so hard when you've got you got him for the first time and you just want to hit him with everything.
And just so you know, he said he'd be with us for half an hour, so it was really generous. And I looked down at about 25 past, and we were still on the first section of questions. And he said he'd hang with us for half an hour. So we got to also respect the time that we've been given as well.
Yeah. But yeah, I like that he's basically immediately fallen into the BHN vibe, which is
one time.
Here's a time we're gonna just double it casually. There was also a question here for thoughts on progressing passenger rail services on Kiwi Rail's North Auckland line from Auckland to Whangarei, similar to Tahuia. I like personally anything that advances passenger rail here in New Zealand. I think as a climate change mitigation feature, as a way of keeping the roading budget down, all of these sort of as a tourism attraction, as a legitimate passenger, just a way to move people efficiently, really quickly. Do you remember what people said about Tahuia? That it was just a waste of money. Who's going to want to go on the train? All of that sort of thing. And it's been sell out after sell out after sell out after sell out. Because traveling by train is cool. You can do work on a train, and it's better than being stuck in traffic.
And now they're talking about Dunedin, Christchurch, Dunedin, and Invercargill. That'd be amazing.
Oh, fuck. If they did Dunedin, I travelled on one of the last Southerners between Dunedin and Christchurch when I was a student. It's a fantastic journey. It's just a great way to travel. If they brought that back, I would be on there day one. Yeah. It's just such a cool trip.
Hey, we need to. There are more chats coming. We're going through them now. Talia and Svi, kia ora Chippy from Nick. Thank you for your super chat. Kiwi Bird National will need to sell off a ton of daffodils on Daffodil Day to make up for this blunder. Thank you, Kiwi Bird. Jezza 97. Thank you for your super chat. Chris, is there a realistic way to block or prevent fast track consents, or will we be trying to fill in giant quarry holes in 3 years? There's no way to block them. They are the government.
And that's the big problem with
majority. It. Yeah.
There's no public submission process. You've just got 3 ministers that said, yep, go for it. We don't need to talk to anybody else. That's why it's so dangerous.
Although they have said they might pull back on that a little bit. They're still going through the ideas. Good question about legalizing weed, Stuart. Thank you for your super chat. Appreciate it. We've also got Kiwi Bird again, fast track, removing the current coalition. Citizen Gold, very generous. Thank you for your $20. Apologize we couldn't get to your chat during the conversation. The Greens have had a few incidents that were unjustly reprimanded. Chloe had the demonstrable lie comment, which was factually correct. Why is it okay for MPs to lie like that, but it isn't okay for them to be called out? Yeah, well, that's all just stupid parliamentary process and rules. And it's a bit like I watched the documentary series The Test on Amazon, and it's about Boxing Day, the Ashes tests between Australia and England, and there's incidents that happen on the field that aren't the spirit of cricket, and so people get pulled over the coals for them. It's a bit like that. Calling someone a liar it's outside the spirit of being a politician, which is bullshit, but it's all a part of what it is. Have we done that one? We like assertive Chippy. Keep it up and go harder, says. Hey Chippy, thoughts on? We've done that one. You didn't get rid of the star. Thank you very much, Alex. Haven't done that one. Planner Walk. It would be cool if Chippy could give his opinion on trans rights, given the antics of the current government. Happy America Pride Month from Planner Walk. Thank you very much for your super chat. Professor Norman Finkelstein recently said Israel is a lunatic state from the Technician. Just a $3.50 there. Thank you very much. It's very generous of you. Done that one. So it's the death toll now, smoking and then cancer. Yeah, $10. That's actually they do seem to be a government of death, aren't they? We should get our cartoonists to do like the Grim Reaper standing behind them or something. It'd be in the house. It does seem that what they're trying to do is pretty revolting. Oh, and the 13,000 pushed into child poverty and how many deaths. Yep, we had all of that stuff tonight actually for a bunch of bunch of commentaries, but we'll run out of it. So that's all the super chats. Thank you guys. You're very generous. We appreciate it. And we do apologize that we couldn't get to them, but it's just impossible to host someone and get through about 40 chats as well. So hide current comments. That's that. There. Right, Chewy. I'm okay. We normally go to 10:30. It's 10:05. Should we have a bit of a look at old Nicola? What are your thoughts?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. I need to just have a thought now because I've got 7 clips and we're not going to do all 7 of them. Let me try and figure out which are the best ones. Well, someone's just mentioned that one, child poverty rates and beneficiaries. Okay, we'll do, actually, I'll do this one first. It's not a very long one. It's actually the last clip I've got. Sorry, guys, but I have them all queued up. I just need to get the right one. 25, because Jack did well and got Nicola Willis to admit to the decisions that they're making are a choice. So let's have a listen to this conversation. And this is about, from memory, I think they call it fiscal drag. Like, even if you have a tax cut, that only brings it up to a couple of years beyond when the last tax cut was. So to actually get it current, to be fair today as it was in 2010 sort of thing, there's the thing called fiscal drag. And so Jack's kind of having the conversation around why are you not bringing that drag right the way to today? Like, let's say it's been 14 years. So you've come forward about 5 years. What about getting it up to current day? If you're going to do this, why aren't you doing it properly? That's a bad summary of the conversation, but that's what they're talking about.
But if you feel so strongly about the injustice of not having adjusted tax brackets, will you as finance minister commit to automatically indexing tax brackets?
No.
Why not?
Because that's not the policy of the coalition government.
Why not?
Because
but you believe that it's been unfair that we've allowed that fiscal drag. So why not have automatic indexing?
We didn't campaign on that. What we campaigned on was making an
campaign on a bunch of stuff.
This is really important, right? And the reason I really wanted to play this is my main clip to play is that they're saying because we didn't campaign on it, we're not gonna do it. Now, Chewy, I know that your point is you also didn't campaign on Smoke Free 2025, example. But what they're actively telling us now is we're not going to do what's best for the country. We're only going to do what was talked about. Now, then of course they do the opposite because they do what's not talked about, Smoke Free 2025. But it's like getting the answer wrong both ways. You didn't campaign on Smoke Free 2025, but you did it. You did campaign on adjusting it. Why don't you make it exact? Because we didn't campaign on changing it all the way through. But what they're starting to do, and I said this to Chippy, is they're starting to talk about we made choices. Chris Bishop did it last week, and now what we need to do is remind them of what their choices are. But they're starting to say it.
Year of office, and we've done that.
I know what you campaigned on, but as finance minister, what's the problem with that idea?
Well, it's important that I deliver on my commitment to get the books back
I understand.
in balance,
I understand what
it
commitments.
is important that I do.
But
that.
I want to know what your philosophy is as finance minister. Why would that be a bad idea?
Well, my philosophy is to get the books back in balance, to reduce the amount of government spending as a proportion of the overall economy, to get that debt tracking down, and to tax people fairly.
Yes.
And if we grow this economy faster, which is the goal of all of our policies, then we should be a wealthier country that can continue to adjust tax brackets. But I first need to do the things we were elected to do.
You don't have a position on indexing tax brackets, is what you're telling me now.
Well,
but just a moment ago, you said no.
Well, as the finance minister, Jack, my position is the government's position, and the government's position is that we are not indexing tax brackets.
Why not?
Because it's not been our policy.
And why is it not your policy?
Because New Zealand can't afford it right now.
And the truth shall set you free. And why can't you afford it right now, Nicola? Why can't you afford it? Does it have anything to do with $3 billion going back to landlords and $14 billion worth of tax cuts?
And that's the message. Would $3 billion help? Probably. It'd help a lot of things.
I felt $3 billion down the back of my couch and I handed it to Nicola Willis. Would they do it? Would they fund the cancer treatments? Yeah. The truth will set you free. She said it. We can't afford it. Why can't you afford it? Because of landlords, because of tax cuts. Although they're talking about a tax cut, so they can't afford it because of tax cut. But landlords is fair, the interest deductibility. Yeah, Chewie, you can jump in there while I try and find another clip. You got anything else to say?
No, there's so much about this Q&A. Look, I'm just going to tell people, just, you know, don't rely on just our highlights of this interview. The whole thing is a bloodbath.
Yeah.
There's just so much. I was shouting at the TV a lot.
The obvious question that we've been asking before the budget and since the budget was, if you weren't giving tax cuts, would you need to be borrowing for the groceries, as she keeps saying?
All things being equal, if every other revenue and spending line in the budget remained the same, but you didn't introduce tax cuts, would you require more or less borrowing?
The borrowing would be the same, because our tax reduction package has been fully offset with savings from elsewhere. That is money that would otherwise have been spent, and it's been delivered in the context of a smaller operating allowance, which is to say the overall position of what the government is requiring is lower than it would otherwise have been.
So hang on. So everything else remains the same. So all of the savings remain the same, your reprioritizations, all of that stuff remains the same, but you don't introduce the tax cuts.
And what hypothetical land are you living? Because I don't think a single party in Parliament said we're going to do the savings that National is doing just for the sake of doing them. And in fact, for Labor to claim that now, while also saying that we shouldn't be reducing the amount of funding being spent on public agencies, we shouldn't be reprioritising the amount of money spent on emergency housing, we shouldn't be stopping Three Waters. All of those decisions we've taken have helped us fund tax relief.
What hypothetical world are you living in if you think that you can't, all things being equal, borrow any more money if you take $10 billion of revenue out of your budget?
Well, we've done.
That's pretty much the start of the conversation, and then they go backwards and forth. I'm not doing that. Well, you are. Well, I'm not doing that. Well, you are doing that. So yeah, it's such an easy question to ask. Remember, we demonstrated it last week by saying, imagine that the government money was under one bank account number, right? But under that bank account number, there was all the suffixes. There was the WIN suffix, and there was the health suffix. It was 01, and there was the interest deductibility suffix, and there was the education suffix. So all different suffixes under that one account. And if you put all of it into this one for interest deductibility, and that reduces it from all the other ones, so they have nothing left in them, then you have to borrow in the other ones to allow that $3 billion to be in the interest deductibility one. So it's just a nonsense. It's almost fascinating, Chewie, that they think they can get away with saying we're not borrowing for tax cuts, or, as Jack did quite well then, we're not borrowing he basically said because of the tax cuts. In other words, if all things were equal, but you weren't doing the tax cuts, would you need to borrow as much? Fine. And she still was like, it's an imaginary world we live in. So they just refuse to answer it.
It's a crazy world, but hypotheticals can never exist.
Yeah, well, it'd be good to remember that for the next election. We're not allowed to talk about hypotheticals. So yeah, it was an interesting one, that's for sure. Let me see. Oh, okay, we should do this. 6:32. Maybe this will be the last one. Actually, there's actually lots of them because we've been talking about this tonight. Q&A in the weekend, of course, the conversation of cancer drugs came up.
In the future. During the election campaign, National promised to fund 13 cancer drugs. What New Zealanders were set to benefit from that funding?
There were about 1,000 New Zealanders who were set to benefit from that, and I want them to hear this message today, Jack. We will meet our commitment to you. We understand how important it is to those patients, to their families.
Even if it's 3 months after you die, it'll be there, just a bit late.
Families, to their loved ones, and we are going to meet that commitment.
When?
With urgency. I expect we will be in a position to make an announcement very soon this year.
Very soon?
Yes.
Why haven't you made it yet?
As I've said, when we came into office, we inherited some fiscal bombs that we were not expecting. One of them was the shortfall in funding for Pharmac, the medicine purchasing agency. That shortfall, we knew there was a small shortfall there. We campaigned on fixing it, but it was far larger than we had been led to believe.
How large was it, Nicola? Was it more than $2.9 billion? Because if it was more than $2.9 billion, I can't say, but you gave $2.9 billion to landlords, or was it less than that?
That meant we had to find $1.8 billion just to sustain access to life-saving medicines.
So if we sustain it at $1.8 billion and we add the other 270 million in for the cancer drugs, that's just over 2 billion. Chewy, can you remind me, how much do they give back to landlords? I can't remember.
So many billion. Like,
was it like
$8.50? No, it's considerably north of that, I think.
Okay. All right. I mean, I've forgotten already.
We made that decision. The next step for us is to make sure we have a policy to purchase those additional cancer medicines. We are working on that in real time. I've spoken with David Seymour and Dr. Shane Retty in recent days, and they are confident we're going to come up with a fix very soon.
So
the interesting thing that Chippy said, he actually said it on the news tonight as well, and he repeated it with us, to say out loud, these are the drugs we're going to fund. How does that not then put you behind the eight ball when it comes to negotiating those prices? Like, if someone said to us, we're going to sponsor BHN no matter what, choice,
which you should.
It's $1 million a year. You know what I mean? Like, doesn't that show your hand from the man who's going to sell his business credentials as the reason he's a good prime minister? They named them. So what's stopping those companies now not just putting a zero on? Because they named them. It's a very, very interesting perspective from Mr. Hipkins. Are we going to sit here in silence for as long as we can? Is that what we're doing now?
Oh, yeah. It's a suicide pact at that point. Dead air.
I think look, there's other stuff to talk about. The $250 a fortnight clip was horrifically uncomfortable. Or maybe we'll play this one because I put this out on my Twitter feed as well. Did you see this? You're not really on Twitter anymore. Going around about how she talked about, when they were in opposition, how dare the government give $3 billion to Shane Jones's slush fund whilst they're giving $3 billion to landlords and giving money to Shane Jones's slush fund. It's pretty interesting.
Okay. I want to throw you a quote. It's not right the government can find billions for Shane Jones's slush fund, but it can't afford life-saving drugs.
Yes, that is a quote from Simon Bridges that I took from his speech at our national conference in 2019. It's on Twitter at the moment.
Yeah.
And look,
we saw it.
That conference resulted in two things. One, the creation of the Cancer Control Agency. Great initiative. That is the agency that came up with the list of 13 cancer drugs that we're committed.
That we're ignoring, that we're not going to do anything about.
To funding. The second thing is this. We will be prioritising funding for cancer drugs.
No. See what she's done? She's not actually addressing she's not addressing the tweet anymore. She's now gone to talking points about it's coming.
It is our commitment. We're going to meet it. So the Nicola Willis in 2019 is the same Nicola Willis as she is now, and I continue to believe that.
So let's just have a quick look at that tweet for people who don't understand what we're talking about. This is you quoting Simon Bridges in 2019.
There we go. So for people who are in the audio podcast, the tweet, it's not on my Twitter feed if you want to go see it. It's not right that the government can find $3 billion for, I'll do the version that she might tweet out this week. It's not right that the government can find $3 billion for landlords, but it can't afford life-saving drugs. New Zealanders shouldn't have to set up a give a little pages just to stay alive. I mean, could it be any more perfect? And also on top of giving the $3 billion to landlords, and they are giving money to Shane Jones for his slush fund as well. Chewy. So what do you say?
It is spectacular. And look, a shout out to Stampy on Blue Sky who actually flicked me that on, when was it? On the 31st. So I don't know where that stands and how that story broke, but he drew my attention to that on Friday. I sent it immediately to Pat. Pat put it up on his socials, and it kind of went from there. But yeah, it is literally perfect, and there is no better argument than quoting a politician back to that politician and then going, what do you say to that person?
Yeah.
What do you say?
Yeah,
everything's the same, but now it's you.
It's so bad. It's such a bad look. My first tweet, I did tweet it out, was, can someone else confirm this, please? And then I found, I went, oh, okay. Because it's even the $3 billion. It looks like a setup. Like even the $3 billion. I mean, the one thing that would have been worse if it had been $2.9 billion for the slush fund, but I was just like, no, this is a bit too close. Is this really for reals? And it was. And yeah, that's pretty bad. I think actually, there's the super chat there. Thank you for your super chat. I had no water for over a week in my illegal dwelling. My landlord is on safari in Africa and owns a Ferrari and acres of land, says the short one. Not entirely sure what that's about. Maybe I've missed something, but there it is.
Jesus, just the fact that landlords, slumlords sometimes.
You know what? We are going to do the last story of the night because it's a shorty anyway. Speaker sends warning after lobbyists install art installation in Beehive. Parliament Speaker Jerry Brownlee has rebuked an MP, not named him, for allowing lobbyists to construct an art installation. I like how they put speech marks around that, which means it's not really an art installation, and film in the Beehive a few days before the budget was released. The taxpayers union released video filmed from the Beehive banquet hall, the same space the budget was released, that argued cuts to the public service are not significant. I don't know if we need to watch this whole thing, but it's pretty terrible. It's a pretty terrible video.
We're here at Parliament today unveiling a brand new modern art installation in the Beehive. Come along and take a look.
It actually doesn't make sense either. This is what I tweeted out about it today. They talk about this being a massive difference, and they use these boxes, and the boxes between the earlier ones and the later ones don't look like a massive difference. Yeah, it looks like it's a bit more, but it certainly doesn't look like a massive difference.
Brand new art installation here at the Beehive, but it's not funded by you, the taxpayer.
Oh,
imagine this box.
But do you know what I thought about that today? Well, who gives you guys money? Who donates to you?
Where did the money for the boxes come, taxpayer onion? Where did it come from?
But if they're getting donations, those donations are otherwise known as taxpayers. So if you are donating money somewhere and you live in New Zealand and you're paying tax, you're a taxpayer. So these money for these are coming from taxpayers. Well, I think it's unintelligent argument.
Represents 1,000 bureaucrats. That's a lot, and it's expensive.
Yeah, and look, they do this.
But in just 6 short years,
look at this.
That number has grown by more than 39%.
This is a massive amount.
To 65,669. That is a massive increase.
So, Chewy, from a marketing point of view, looking at those two stacks there, does the one on the right look like a massive increase to the one on the left? Because to me, it doesn't. So I think they've actually failed in their messaging as well as being a bit dodgy about where they're doing it.
But Pat, it's taller, and taller is worse. Like the taxpayers onion are quite well known for using some pretty shonky graphs, and I like that their art installation, which is just literally a pile of like these commentary I could make there, right? They make this smug thing that it's an art installation, no taxpayer money went into it, right? It's a pile of fucking boxes, you nonce. Like you wouldn't know art if it bit you on the dick. Jesus. Oh, God, I hate the taxpayer. They are an AstroTurf group set up by Atlas to make other AstroTurf groups. Why? Who invited them into Parliament? We know it's some ACT MP.
Yeah.
And it was so egregious that it made fucking Jerry Brownlee have to do something. And he said, you can't do that. They can't film in the Parliament. You know, it's just dumb. All of their arguments are dumb. Like, whenever there is funding for the arts, they'll have to criticize it, but it's funny. It's always brown art or it's always weird art that they want to criticize. They never criticize the funding that the Royal New Zealand Ballet gets or the New Zealand Symphony Orchestra. Like it's just the same old shit all over again. They also don't give their increase in bureaucrats any context at all. Like what's happened over the last 6 years? Fuck knows. Has our population gone up? I don't know. Was there any events that we needed more bureaucrats for? No. What do bureaucrats do? Nothing of value, clearly. It's all bullshit. And the other thing that I have a real fucking problem with when it comes to the taxpayers union, why do these people that represent that non-union always look like leftover dough that is just people have stacked up? Like, Jordan looks like he's got the most punchable face in the world, and that guy's running a good argument for number 2. What the fuck? Why do we pay these guys any attention? Why does anyone pay them any attention? They're just nonsense.
Yeah. I think the point you made there amongst your rant and body and body shaming was the thing about numbers. Numbers go up bad. I mean, we still have not yet heard what any of these groups, be it the national-led government, be it the taxpayers union, explain to us how many bureaucrats would be a good number. Remember, I've used this example before. Sorry if you've heard it from me before, but if you've got a water tank and you've got a pipe at the top of the water tank and the tank has to be filled all the way up for the pipe to receive the water, and when National comes in, the water tank is filled to the top, so water's flowing, and then they reduce it by half, and then the water's not flowing, and then Labor comes in and they put it back to full. They've doubled the number of water, doubled the number of bureaucrats, but now it's flowing correctly, and they come in and they go, bah, they doubled the number, we're going to reduce it back to what it was. It doesn't mean it functions. No one has explained to us, no one, and I guess you could say including Labor, what the number of bureaucrats we need to run this country. All you hear from the right is too many. So therefore, following their logic, 0 would probably be the best number of bureaucrats to have. But because we always hear too many. That video is basically saying 4,000 is not enough. More, please. More. Too many. But no one's told us how many are actually needed to run it. Do we need 1? Do we need 5? Do we need 50? Do we need 500? Do we need 50,000? No one said that. And that's actually all that matters. Like I've said a dozen times before, smaller government is not better. Bigger government is not better. Better government is better. And however a government runs at its best with enough people to do what we need to do, and to be fair, and no more, we've never been told that number. We've just been told the right say too many, and then the left build up from, but they never say too little. But they start to build the numbers up again. It's frustrating.
I mean, again, it's that pervasive myth that government service and public service is like it was in the 80s, where it was a jobs program, and it's gliding on. It's that classic thing of paper shufflers and that sort of thing. I know a lot of really good, really passionate people that are worried about big segments of New Zealand's population that work very, very hard, and they're lumped in with that perception of what public service is. And can you imagine what that's like to see you described in that way by the government that you work for? Like, imagine that if you were at a fucking work dinner and your boss just spends the whole time telling everybody what a shiftless bunch of pricks work in the loading dock, and you just got to sit there and take it. Like, it's shitty. It is so shitty that is the narrative that has been allowed to. Oh well, that's the narrative that's been allowed to remain almost unchallenged by the media. Again, no context to that number, no context to that growth, no answer to how many is a good amount.
Yeah,
I'm sorry, I hear it.
Sorry, I interrupted your rant so well there, but I just saw in the chat someone say that the image was already on Discord. There you go. That's actually really very good. Really, very, very good.
I'm going to give a shout out to the people on Discord. Like, even though I'm on Discord, I don't often look into our server. But every time I do, there are treats. I saw this cursed image pop in there today. And that is just so good for everybody in the audio podcast. Oh, how the fuck do you describe this? You have to be familiar with Red Dwarf, but we've always said that Rimmer is David Seymour. But to see Winston Peters as Cat, and to see Luxon masterfully done as Crichton, is just well done,
not,
that man.
But that's not David Seymour. That's actually the real actor, isn't it?
The line is so blurred now. I don't know anymore.
It would be good to know, because I'll put that on my Twitter. It'd be good to know who did that. So if there's someone in our crew that did that, let us know, because it's always good to give credit. We like to make our own stuff and share our own stuff around, but when we share other people's stuff, it's always good to give credit. Well, have a look at that. We actually did a couple of other stories. Look, guys, we hope you enjoyed Chippy tonight. Thank you so much for joining us. As I said, biggest live show we've ever had. We finally cracked the 1,000 live viewers. So very, very cool. And thanks for being with us. We haven't talked about lots of stuff. Trump getting his 32 convictions on Friday. I caught it all live. It was very interesting to watch every cable network go into an absolute breakdown. So I got that wrong. I said I thought it would be a hung jury. But I also, here's another prediction. Maybe if I'm wrong again, it'll please you, Chewy. He won't get jail time. And he won't get jail time. No, but for actually more than just, he's just, did I say 32? 34. It's also more than just who he is. It's if you actually just take Trump presidency, all that kind of away from it. He's a 77-year-old man with a first-time offense of what is deemed to be quite a low-level crime, not a dangerous crime, not a violent crime. And a 77-year-old man who had done all those things wouldn't go to jail. Although listening to some commentators, they reckon it's 50-50. So, and that'll be interesting. I think it's July, isn't it? It's about a month away.
Yeah, I look, the way that the US system works. He's a wealthy elderly white man. He's not going to see any jail term at all. It doesn't even disqualify him for running for president. But look, my whole thing is if the National Party, the Republican Party go ahead and fucking nominate him, that's their whatever shreds of their reputation is left on the table, gone, poof, gone, and puff a smoke.
They're going to nominate him.
They absolutely are. I know this analogy is overused, but it's like watching a train crash. You can see it. You're waving. You're like, don't do it, and it's still happening. The bridge is definitely out, and it's the same with the Democrats. They're going to nominate Biden because, of course, they are. And their system is so hilariously, terrifyingly compromised and broken that this is a battle between two decrepit geriatrics that are heavily compromised and speak to a tiny fraction of that country. Like, there are legitimate criticisms of Biden, of his capability to lead, his actions and stuff like that. But then there's nobody else. You can't pick a third person, because if you do, then Trump definitely gets in. You can't not vote, because then Trump definitely gets in. So you have to hold your nose and vote for, like, it's fucked. It's fucked. Burn it all down. Like, let's build Trump's wall. Like, let's get the international community to get on the same page about something, and we'll fund a wall all the way around America's borders. We'll do a naval blockade for the seas, and we just say, look, we'll put a lid on it. You guys sort it out and tell us when it's done. We just don't want whatever's going to happen to take out the rest of us.
Do you know, in all seriousness, what they probably should do? They should probably secede from one another. I mean, Texas is something like the 16th largest economy in the world, or maybe even like the 6th largest or 8th. But I always think about America like they're actually, maybe 30 countries. I know not all, because some of the states are very similar. They actually, the best thing they should probably do is go, off you go, blue state, off you go, red state, and just do your own thing. That's probably the only way that would actually survive it. It'll end up in something at some stage. Some horrible.
And with that in mind, go and watch Civil War, which is a terrifying movie at the moment.
All right, we're done, Chewy. We're done, and we'll be back in a second to give you a wrap up. But for now,
and sure, pick up the news, big Harry style. Keeping it loose. New Zealand, where the politics play, they bring the truth every single day. Talking about the mess all over the land. shine a light.
I need glow sticks.
Little mic in their hands.
Glow sticks? You're going to get on
Do a
eBay.
rave.
Just
I'm
back
an
straight
e-boy.
up. Plan chewing. Never backing up. From the Cape to Bluff, no place too far.
Had a message the other day, Joey, from someone in Melbourne, and she went, he or she went, that damn song, you guys were lucky, you go to bed. It's going around in my head for the rest of the evening.
At the mighty voice, Pat and Chewy, they'll make the right choice.
All right, team, thanks for being with us. Thanks, Chippy, for coming to say goodbye. G'day, I should say. We look forward to speaking to more politicians this year. If you enjoy what we do, if you appreciate what we do, you can help us to make this product by heading to patreon.com/Big Hearing News. Big shout out to Brian, who became a member during the show tonight. And that's about it for me. Anything from you, Chewy?
No. Thanks for making tonight like the biggest show we've ever had.
Yeah.
I thought we were still probably a couple of weeks away from cracking 1,000, so very glad to have done it. And the more of you that watch the show and tell people about us and pump our numbers up, the more likely we are to get more guests like that. And maybe we'll start on our right-wing leaders bingo card.
Yeah.
I wouldn't hold your breath on that, but maybe.
All right, team. See you tomorrow night from 9. Hooroo.
Cheers, fam.